the laying on of my hands, for God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. Amen?
Amen.
So this week we're going to observe Halloween, right? Kids all over the United States will dress up in superhero costumes, princesses, cowboys, and horror character costumes. We'll do some trick-or-treating, we'll eat too much candy, and some adults will probably party like a rock star, with no holds back and no inhibitions. And the majority of the U.S., in addition, will watch a scary movie. Except you, Ariel. I know. When I was a teenager, I was and you too, Holly. I'm with you. When I was a teenager, I was already a movie buff, and I was a reader, and I read a lot. I watched a lot of movies, and I loved horror movies best. Some of my favorites were, now this was back in the day, right? So this was Jaws, The Omen, Carrie, J.D.'s Revenge, The Shining, It, Friday the 13th, which was the first date I had with my beloved Samars. Wow. And Halloween. Right, they just did the remake, just released it the other day with the same Jamie Lee Curtis. I love to be scared and to evaluate a movie situation to determine what my actions would be if I was in the same situation. What would I do differently if I was faced with that monster, that terrorizing situation? Some of the movies were made from books that I read, like Jaws, like The Omen, like Carrie, which was the first Stephen King novel I ever read. I also read The Shining by the time I saw it. And as an aside, eventually, I read all Stephen King's works. Some of his best tomes made it to the big screen, and a couple made it into miniseries. And though Carrie was the first Stephen King book I ever read, of all the others, Salem's Lot was the book King wrote that made me read all his other books. Salem's Lot was about a novelist, Ben Mears, that returned to his home to find the haunted house of his youth was being inhabited by a for-real vampire. He watched as more and more people in his town were vanishing when he teamed up with a local kid, Mark Petrie, whose parents had been killed by the vampire. They teamed up and went on eventually to kill one of the oldest and deadliest vampires ever known. But the part that captured me, the part that still does capture me, was the scene where a local priest came face to face with the vampire. The priest stood between the boy and the monster with his cross in his hand. The cross was glowing white hot with the power of God and the power of faith. And the vampire was shrinking back, afraid of that power. Unfortunately, the glow of the cross began to diminish as the priest continued to stand there, because the vampire, though afraid, did not leave. And that made that priest question his own faith. So the vampire said to the priest, "Put down your cross and stand against me with your faith alone. If your faith is as strong as to resist me, I will leave you and the boy alone." The priest stood there, now with just a wooden cross, no glow. No faith, no glow. And the vampire reached out, took the cross, and broke it into 2 pieces. The boy ran when he witnessed that, but the priest didn't get away from the vampire. His faith, his fear, overcame his faith, and he was defeated. That was a scary book. I mean, sleep with the lights on scared. I'm talking about let your little brother sleep in the room with you that night scared. I mean, stare at the closet door all night knowing that the vampire is behind that door. It was great, and I loved it because I love scary books. And today's chapter in 2 Timothy 1, particularly 6 through 7, it addresses this whole idea of fear. Not fear from a scary movie or a horror novel, but fear like timidity or cowardice or weakness or an unwillingness to confront what you know to be wrong. Though fear and thrill are the drivers in scary movies and novels in real life, non-literary life, we don't want to be afraid. Yet, like Timothy, sometimes we let fear rule our lives. We let it determine who our friends are and who we love. We let fear of association stop us from standing on what we believe. Sometimes we let fear dictate where we can and cannot go. Sometimes because of safety, which is wise, but sometimes we just don't want people to change their opinion of us, so we're afraid. We also let fear keep us paralyzed and leave us in toxic relationships and situations. So today, for a few moments, because we got to go past our sandwiches, let's talk about the sermonic topic, what you scared of. Okay? Lord, we love you and we honor you. We ask you to get the glory and honor, God. I'm tired. 3 o'clock in the morning was late, God, but I know you got the power. You gave it to me. You gave me the love. And you gave me a sound mind. So now help me to get the words off the page so you get the glory. We love you and we bless you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Timothy is a pastoral book in the New Testament written by Paul to his protege, Timothy. In this opening section of the letter, Paul deals with Timothy's timidity and fear in working with his church members and others in the community. Timothy was young, and he was a pastor. Younger than most of the people in his flock, but pastor nonetheless. And by the tone of Paul's letter, Timothy was being shamed for being young and being in charge at the same time. That shame pushed Timothy into being afraid, and that fear made Timothy ineffective in his job of pastoring. Pastors can't be scared. They can't shrink back, can't skirt issues. They can't turn their backs and run. Pastors have to stand. They have to stand in the face of ugliness and abuse. They have to stand in the face of loss, sorrow, and grief. They have to stand at the wedding ceremony, after the finalization of the divorce, in the courtroom, in prisons, in the hospital, and at the morgue. Pastors have to stand. That's just part of their job. Part of the job description. It's something they have to do. But this story about Timothy the timid isn't just for ministers. It's for each one of you as well. Because each of us is given the spirit of power, the spirit of love, and a sound mind. Let's discuss that and how these 3 gifts of the Spirit help us to live our best lives. The spirit of power. Dunameos. Say that with me. Dunameos. Dunameos. See, Greek. Look at you. When we accept the gift and inclusion in the family of God, the Holy Spirit dwells in us and gives us power. Not power like a fictional hero, but God-driven, God-poured internal power. The fearlessness that allows us to face what is unfaceable, like yesterday at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. Because we know that God can sustain us through American terrorism and anti-Semitism. Yes. Because we can be outraged and maintain our power at the same time. Yes. We have to have power to deal with folks that we see every day. Yeah. We got to have power in order to restrain ourselves from slapping the taste out of our sassy kid's mouth or the disagreeable loved one who has taken the responsibility of testing all your reserve nerves. You need power, y'all. You got to have power to stand against a flood of negativity and traditionally hurtful beliefs when you side with the marginalized. You need power, beloved, and God has given us the spirit of power. You got to take that power, beloved, and you got to live like T'Challa. You got to live like Wonder Woman. You got to live like Jesus and put on display the power of God in all his interactions. Amen. We have to continue to enter situations in our lives with the knowledge that we have the spirit of power, that I created the world and everything in it, power, that I am the reason for the rotation of the earth and the entire universe. Power. That grave-busting, open resurrection power. That's within us. So what you scared of? Right. The power that's in you doesn't mean you're faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, or able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, but the power to live your life like it's gold. Yes. Like you have a purpose and you're determined to realize it. Like you have that inner fortitude to kill off all the vampires, like in Salem's Lot, that suck the life out of you. Yeah. You have the spirit of power. So what you scared of? What? Love. The spirit of love. Agape. Can you say agape? Agape. The spirit of love is the spirit of God. The scripture says God is love, right? That's right. God gives us God's spirit so we can do those things that must be done. And do it in a way that helps the ones being helped. Help them feel blessed. We're supposed to help and love people and not hurt and hinder them. That's right. The spirit of love to continue being a caregiver for the one that you are responsible for. The spirit of love to stop thinking about yourself all the time. And consider people you're in relationship with. Not saying you got to neglect you, just remembering and acting like we were made for relationship. The spirit of love that makes you say no to your kids when they want to go to that party, sorry guys, and you got the bad feeling about that. That love that helps you get out of bed and go pick up your friend who's too inebriated to drive. The love that makes you stand in silence when you're being told off because you know you're supposed to love folk in spite of themselves. That crazy sacrificial love that helps you give up your plans for the weekend so your loved one can enjoy their own. Amen. That love that helps you get in touch, that helps you in getting in touch with a parent you don't really know and you didn't really grow up with. Or the one that you do really know and you wish you didn't grow up with. That love that God has poured into you allows you to tell the truth in a way that can be heard. Your intent is expressed in the sentiment of your words and the caring manner in which you say it. God has given us the spirit of love. For Timothy to be able to stop older members and false teachers from making him be ashamed of his youth, because of the spirit of love, it helps you to reframe a situation that sucks and help you see the worth in it. The spirit of love to let you pick up those clothes your spouse left on the floor 3 days ago, wash them, dry them, and fold them. Thank you, honey. And pushes you to give that homeless guy some money and to confirm her humanity by just having a conversation with her that says you don't judge her, but you love her. You need the spirit of love to preach to a group that may or may not affirm you with an amen. I said
amen.
Amen.
Come on.
And God, the God who knew you before you were born, who saw you when you were knit together in your mother's womb, who loved you, that God, who sees you when you bless others and when you don't. That God poured love into you so you can let the world see what it means to be fully human and have divine love and working love and working, living, working, and through you. That's where the priest in the Salem's Lot story failed. He forgot about the love and the power that had been poured into him so that he could generate such fierce power that no one could stand against it. The priest had a monster in his face, but he forgot the power of love and power of love and God in his heart. What about you? What's stopping you from showing God's love? What you scared of?
What you scared?
Sound mind. Sophronism. Sophronism. Can you say that? Sophronism. That's a sound mind. God has given us a sound mind. God has given us the ability to think with a sober mind. A sound mind helps us not be swayed by what we see, but knowing that we have God's power and God's love, it helps us to deal with the real issues of life. A sound mind recognizes that fear within exaggerates what causes fear without. And based on that recognition, walks in the assurance of God's love and care. A sound mind informs us that bombs sent in the mail meant to terrorize folks who stand in opposition to the current administration are a real threat, but still stand against what's wrong. When we have the power of God, the spirit of love, and a sound mind, we refuse to be terrorized.
Yes.
A sound mind helps us be what God says when everybody else tells us to be something else. We've been given a sound mind. So what you scared of? Yeah. In novels and in movies, we see monsters that are waiting behind the next door, over the next hill, or down the street. That's why in predominantly African-American movie theaters, you'll hear many voices yelling out warnings to the main character during the movie. Don't go over there, can't you see? Yeah. The evil that lurks in those stories is scary, hideous, and wicked. And since there are stories, movies, novellas, or epic movies, this stuff is just fiction. But God has given us the spirit of power, the spirit of love, and a sound mind so we can face those real-life monsters in our lives. Yes. With these three gifts, we can face any opponent, any scary monster, any wicked witch of the West, because God has equipped us with what we need to conquer our fears. God has equipped us to stand in the face of anything and stare it down. So as we enter this All Hallows Eve week, let's remember that we don't face the darkness without hope. We've been given what we need to deal with the Frankenstein monsters of terror. the vampires that suck the life out of us, werewolves of destruction, the mummies of objectification, the demons of hate, and the zombies of dead and dying relationships. And since that's true, we know what we've got, and we know who's with us and what they've done to deliver us. We know that in the end, the worst vampire, monster, whatever it is, cannot overcome the power of love, the power of power, and a sound mind that God has given us, and that God that dwells within us. So what you scared of? Amen. 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 So, now that we're done with the sermon, before we go out and do our civic duty, if there's a person here that has not accepted God, has not accepted the fact that Jesus has died for you, has not come to understand that you're already a part of this family, if there's somebody here that doesn't feel that connection, that power, that love, that sound mind,